The Grants Gateway opportunity is called the 2018 Emergency Food Assistance Providers, and this is for not-for-profits. There's another one for governmental entities, but that's not what this webinar is for. This is for the one for not-for-profits. Once we get into the gateway, you'll see it's got its own unique ID, and that's DEC 01 DMMEFR-2018. The application deadline is on February 1st, 2019 at 3 o'clock. Questions are due, so if you have questions to ask, we can answer them, and the way that the state works is we want everybody to see the questions that were asked and the answers that were provided to be fair to everybody. So your questions are due by January 25th, 2019, and that'll give us time to answer them in time before the due date. So in the next slide, I'll show how that works. The answers will be uploaded to the Grants Gateway as they come through. So, application and program questions. So for general information on completing the application or for clarification of application requirements, contractual terms, procedures, there's that that email address there, organicsgrants@dec.ny.gov. That's where they want you to send the questions if you have specific questions about the grant, about, is your program viable? Will it work underneath this grant opportunity? Certain questions like that. So if you can, please put the words Food Assistance RFA in the subject line of the email. That way they can know what program this is about. So again, we'll accept those questions through email until the close of business on January 25th. And then the questions and answers will be uploaded in the Grants Gateway for all of you to view. And again, I'll show you where that is as we get into the Gateway. There's also a help desk for the Grants Gateway. So for technical assistance with the Gateway, maybe you have problems with your login or roles or certain information like that, or you don't know how to fill something out. Again, we'd like you to refer to this webinar and the video, but certainly call or email our help desk if you need to. We have a website, grantsreform.ny.gov, and if you were to go to the Grantees tab, which I'll show you again in a few minutes, if you went to the Grantees tab, you'll be able to see videos and manuals and support that we have for you there. There's also the email address, grantsgateway@its.ny.gov. And you can call our help desk at 518-474-5595. That is open from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day, every weekday. And again, this is help for technical assistance with the Grants Gateway. On the Grants Reform website, there's a training calendar, and you can go there to view other training sessions, for instance, for pre-qualification. There's also a generic application webinar, which wouldn't be as detailed as the one you're in right now, so I wouldn't really worry about going to that one. So first thing is registration. All entities that want to apply for a grant in the state must be registered in the Grants Gateway. So if you are already, if your organization, your not-for-profit organization is registered, you don't have to do it again. But you do have to do it if you're new to the system or new to working with the state. So the process is not, it's not something you can get done in just a matter of minutes. It includes filling out a form and getting that form notarized and then sending it in to us via mail. So don't wait until the last week to try to do that, because you may run out of time. Again, it's got to be notarized, and there's a few people that have to be signed. So it's a very easy form, and I'll show you it in a few minutes. But if you haven't done it, don't wait until the last moment to do it. It could take up to a week to get registered once your paperwork is received, because the registration actually takes us minutes. But if you don't have an SFS vendor ID, SFS is the statewide financial system. If you don't have a vendor ID with them, that could take 2 or 3 or 4 days to get set up. So again, don't wait till the last week. Don't even wait till the last month. Do it as soon as you can if you need to get registered and set up in the Gateway. So both the Grants Gateway itself and the the Grants Reform website and the Grant Opportunity Portal in the Gateway has the registration form. And again, I'll show you that when we get into it. Okay, another thing is pre-qualification. All nonprofit organizations applying for grants in the state must be pre-qualified in the Grants Gateway prior to the application due date. So that's another thing you have to get working on once you get registered. The Grants Reform website has a lot of information about that. We've got a manual for it. We've got webinars every Tuesday and Thursday at, I believe it's 10:30 You'll have to check on that, but that's in that calendar, and that'll help you get your organization pre-qualified if you're not, or maintain your pre-qualification if you've previously done it and lost it. So you must be pre-qualified by 3 p.m. on February 1st, 2019. And you see I have a little asterisk there because, you can't wait until 3 o'clock on that day to do it. You have to do it, give it at least 7 days in advance because you have to submit your document vault and get it reviewed by someone at the state agency. And then if there's problems, they have to send it back to you. So again, this is not something I would wait on. I would get started on it right away. You certainly can work on pre-qualification and your application at the same time. That's no problem. But just make sure that your document vault is pre-qualified before that due date of 3 p.m. on February 1st. So your organization, your document vault has to be in the status of pre-qualified or pre-qualified open on that day and that time. And again, I'll point out a few other things about that when we get into the website. Another important thing to know is the grantee user roles. The Grants Gateway is role-based, meaning you can do certain things in the gateway based on the type of role that you were given when you were registered. So when we register your organization, you send in that registration form, you identify 1 or 2 people who are going to be the grantee delegated administrator. You can see that's this role down in the bottom left here. And that person is someone who can work on add or editing user accounts, and they can work on pre-qualification, which is called the document vault. So they can't work in applications, they can't work in contracts, but they can work in kind of the back end, again, the document vault and adding or editing user accounts. So you'll have to get that person to set up an account for you. We leave it up to your organization to decide who does what, who gets what role. So there's one role called the grantee. You can see up here in the top left. This is somebody who can start and edit an application. They can save all the information in an application, but they cannot submit the application. So they can't send it to us before the due date. They can only work on it. So you'll need somebody in these other roles on the right here, either the grantee contract signatory or the grantee system administrator. These users can do everything that the grantee can do. They can start an application, save an application, but they can also submit it to us. So it's their signatory. You can see grantee contract signatory or grantee system administrator. The system administrator has a couple additional admin abilities in the system, but for this purpose, or for these purposes here, again, they're able to sign and submit an application. So you don't need to have somebody in the role of grantee. Grantee is really, you could use it if you have somebody that, again, is maybe a grants writer or something like that, somebody who isn't going to submit the application, but they can work on it. So you don't have to have somebody in that role, but you definitely have to have somebody in the role of signatory or system administrator so they can submit that application. A couple more notes about this, or just restating what I just said. The grantee delegated administrator can add new accounts and work on the document vault, but they cannot work on the grant applications themselves. But they can set up other users. At the very least, they need to set up somebody with the grantee contract signatory role, because that's the person that can submit an application. Or, interchangeable with that, is that grantee system administrator. You can see these two. The grantee can start and edit the application, but cannot submit the application. And it is certainly acceptable for one person to have multiple roles and thus multiple accounts in our system. If you're a smaller organization, you may only have one person doing everything. That's fine. But you will still need those different roles because they don't overlap. Well, they do overlap a bit, but there's specific things that only those certain users can do. So you can certainly use the same email address, even set up the same password if you want, but the usernames and the user accounts would be different in different roles. Okay, so what are the next steps? So make sure that your organization is registered in the Grants Gateway. Now you've got plenty of time. You've got until February. But again, don't wait until the last week or even the last 2 or 3 weeks. Make sure your organization is pre-qualified, or at least work to get pre-qualified between now and February 1st. And you certainly have to be pre-qualified before or by February 1st. Ensure that you have people in your organization set up with the right roles. We just talked about those different roles. Download and read the RFA in its entirety. So we'll be looking at that in a few minutes. I'm going to be glossing over it, but you should not. You should understand all the details in it. Submit any questions you have to that email address, and then look for those questions to be answered, and I'll show you where to find that. Start your application, the sooner the better. So, you don't have to start it this week, but I would certainly get going fairly soon. And we can't overstate this because there's so many instances we have of people that have waited till the last minute and then they realized they didn't have enough time to do it. They didn't realize they had to provide this attachment or whatever, and they missed the due date. And then they complain that they didn't have enough time. Well, of course they did have enough time. They just waited too long. So we don't want you to be one of those people, so please don't. We suggest you submit your application prior to the deadline. Obviously, you have to do it prior to the deadline, but we're saying, maybe 24 or 48 hours in advance. That way, if you try to do it 48 hours in advance and you get an error because you realize you forgot to do a part, you've got the time to take care of that instead of waiting until 2:58 on the 1st. And I said this before, but you can start or work on your application even if you aren't pre-qualified yet. You don't have to wait for it, but you should be working on both, or you can be working on both at the same time. Pre-qualification is basically you proving to us that you're a well-run not-for-profit. There are certain policies we want you to have in place, certain procedures we want you to follow, and there are certain documents that you need to provide us. For instance, your charity's registration, your IRS 990, and an audit. So these are all documents that charities should be able to provide to us, and there are, again, policies and procedures you should have in place to be a well-run not-for-profit. So that's what the act of pre-qualification is providing that information to us, proving it to us, and having a reviewer at a state agency look it over and approve it. What DEC just said is that you're reviewed on eligibility, and it's actually addressed in the Q&A, which I'll show you in a few minutes. But it isn't scored. It is basically if there's more applications than funding available, then it'll go on a first-come, first-served basis. Whoever submitted it first will get first choice as long as they were eligible. So let's go to the Grants Reform website. And this is a website that'll just give you some information about working in the Grants Gateway and getting pre-qualified. So if we go to grantsreform.ny.gov, and just so you know, over the period of time between right now and when your application is due, this website will be updated. We have a brand new design, which obviously will be a lot better than this, and it'll be a lot easier to navigate, and it's under the newer New York State branding and layout. So this website will look different, but the same information will be there. If you go to this Grantees tab here, on the left we have the training calendar. If I click on that, that's where you'll see there are links to the webinars for pre-qualification and for applying for a grant. So applying is 10 a.m. and pre-qualification is 11:30 every Tuesday and Thursday. All right. Also on the Grantees tab is on the left here, downloads. Here's the registration form right here. I talked about that. It's a one-pager, and you'll fill out information here up at the top. You'll say what kind of an entity you are. You'll put in those at least one, but preferably two names of people that are a delegated administrator. That's the person, again, that can set up other accounts and work on the document vault. You'll have your head of the organization sign it, and you'll have it notarized by a notary public. On the second page is instructions. If you don't have an SFS vendor ID, you have to provide us with this substitute W-9 form. We also ask for you to provide us an organizational chart, and I'll show you in a minute that we have a template for that. And you can see the address down here where to send it. And again, if you have questions or concerns, you can email us or call us. So let me go back to the Grants Reform website. That was this registration form. Sample organization chart, if you need to fill one out when you're submitting your registration form, you can get that there. The overall grantee user guide, this is something that's being updated, but this is, general how to work in the Grants Gateway. Okay, there's also videos. I would ignore the one for apply for funding because the one we're doing right here is more direct to what we're talking about. Registration, video about registration, and then a video about getting pre-qualified. Those will both be helpful if you need to work on those things. So again, that's grantsreform.ny.gov, and we went to the Grantees tab here. Okay, the other website is grantsgateway.ny.gov. I'm just going to zoom in here for you a little bit. And I want to make sure everybody realizes it's not www.grantsgateway.ny.gov. So grantsgateway.ny.gov. But if you were to type in www, it's auto-filling. If you were to type in www.grantsgateway.ny.gov, you'll get this error. The site is not secure. You could go to it, but you're on a non-secure website because there's no certificate. It's just the way the state sets up certain web applications and certain secure applications. We just don't want you to go to the www. If you take that out, and again, just go to grantsgateway.ny.gov, you'll be brought to the website. Okay, you can see I have no www in there. And before I log in, I want to go over the overview here of this page and what you're going to get into. So I'm going to go kind of backwards here on this page. We're not logging in yet. I'm going to start from the right here and registration. So we talked about registration already. You can see this request access now. So here again is the registration form, the same form that I showed you a few minutes ago. The substitute W-9 form if you need an SFS vendor ID. And if you do have an SFS vendor ID, you can type it in here and verify it, and it'll tell you if your organization is registered or not. So we'll go back. That was the registration tab in the Grant Opportunity Portal. Next is notification. It's a little late for this now, but if you were to click on Sign Up Now, you could be alerted by email next time a grant opportunity is posted in these categories. So you'd fill out your name, email, and information, and you would select which categories you're interested in. So for instance, if this was for environmental supports or health services, and you signed up for that, you would have been notified via email when this grant opportunity was posted. So if you haven't already, you could do that for future grant opportunities. And that was notification. Next is browsing and searching for grant opportunities. So browse, as the name implies, you can just look through all of the grant opportunities that are out there. You can see there's 4 pages right now showing. But search, either clicking here or going back from the portal and clicking on this Search Now. Search will allow you to search for the grant opportunity based on these criteria. So by the grant opportunity name, if you know a keyword. For instance, the word food is one of the keywords we can use here. If you want to know by status, eligibility, you can see only for not-for-profits. You could select that if you wanted to. Or by funding agency, if you know it's from DEC. So I'm going to write the word food and DEC. All right, so I found 2 items that have the word food in it and are posted by DEC. And the one we care about is this first one on top because it's for not-for-profits. And it is the 2018 Emergency Food Assistance Providers Increased Food Donation. And it was posted, made available on September 5th, and it is due on February 1st. So if I click on this button, I can learn a little bit more about it. Now remember, I didn't log into the system yet. All I'm doing is looking at the grant opportunity. I'm not actually going in to apply for it just yet. So we click on it, and we can see some more information. There's that unique grant opportunity ID, and when I start an application, my application number will be this, DEC01-DMMEFR-2018, and then a 5-digit number. So if you were the first person to apply, it'd be -00001. Who's the state agency? What's the name? There's a name again. Contact name and email address. And then the solicitation profile is just a few paragraphs explaining this grant opportunity. On the right, we have that due date again, February 1st at 3 o'clock. They are 2-year contracts. There's $800,000 available. Your application can be between $100 or $15,000. You can't go over $15,000 in your request. Letter of intent is not required. Q&A, we talked about the Q&A. Send it to that email address, and when it's done, or when questions are answered, they will be uploaded here. And you can see this click here. If I click on it, it allows me to open up the Q&A document. Right now it's 5 pages. and you can see that it was updated on 9/17. So there's information here about the webinar that we're in right now. Presumably there's information about that, the question about the first come, first serve, so that's in here as well. So I certainly would read this and make sure you understand it. And if you're asking a question, it may have already been asked. So I would look here first before you send your question in. You can see there's been 18 questions so far. Okay, so that was the Q&A document, and that's found here on the click here. And you can see we want them, we will post them by 12/29, not at 12 a.m. Obviously, we're posting them all right now, so that's kind of not necessary. But we've been posting them, and we'll be posting them as a good number come in day by day. All right, so just to remind you, how did we get there? We went to grantsgateway.ny.gov. We went to the portal, and we searched for the grant opportunity. All I did was search for the word food and everything that's from DEC. I found the two. The one we're talking about is the one for not-for-profits. I click on it, and that Q&A document is right here where it says click here. Okay, so I'm going to log into the system here, and we have this test environment that I'm going to log into. And you'll just click on the login in the top left and type in your username and password. So I logged in as someone in the role of grantee. You can see it confirms that, what role you're in. And I'm going to go over the overview of the layout of the page here. So on the top is searching options. So we've already been to the portal, but since I'm logged in for an organization, I could search for applications, contracts, payments, progress reports, or tasks related to my organization. So once I apply or start an application for this one, I'll be able to find it here under applications. If I was awarded a contract, I could search for contracts and find it. If I use the Grants Gateway for payments, that's something that the Grants Gateway does, but not all programs are using it yet. I could search for them here. Progress reports are related to contracts, so you're reporting on the progress of your goals quarter after quarter. And then tasks are also related to contracts. So everything here, these four on the right, are related to searching for contract-related items. And then the only thing that would be useful for you right now would be applications. You could search for your application. We haven't started one yet, so we're not going to do that just yet. In the black bar here, we have a link to training materials. You can see there's a couple of those documents that I referred to earlier. Organization. This is where your grant delegated or your grantee delegated administrator would go. And I just have one extra click here because I'm assigned to two different organizations. They would go here, and here's where they could work on their document vault. And you can see this is where those documents that I talked about are required. There's these required forms and required documents. I'm not going to go through them. That's not the point of this webinar. That is that Tuesday webinar at 11:30. But that's where, and there's that video again that will walk you through it. But that's where document vault is and pre-qualification is. They can also go to members, organization members, and this is where, if you're the right user, you can add new users. So they would click on, there'd be a button here to add members, and they could add a new member. So that was the organization button, really most useful for the grantee delegated administrator. Profile is your personal profile. If you need to change your password or email or something, log out would obviously log you out. So I'll go back to the home page. And we have this blue bar, and I would refer to this as the action bar because right now there's just the option to show help, but as we go through the system there'll be the save button and some other buttons that allows you to save the page that you're on. Now I'm going to say one thing that I think is important to realize, and you should use the Grants Gateway only in Internet Explorer 11. Now, I know that sounds annoying and very restricting. The reason for that is because the Grants Gateway is developed in Microsoft.NET. It's a Microsoft product that really does work best with IE 11. We are a few versions behind in it, and they'll be updated next year. But until then, there's certain things that just don't work right in Chrome or Firefox or other browsers, even in Microsoft Edge. So we do suggest that you use Internet Explorer 11. We hope you can do that. If not, the other ones work, but not all the way, I should say. And when it comes to the work plan, I'll show you that there's a couple things in there that actually don't work properly with those other browsers. So that's why we say we only really support Internet Explorer 11. Okay, so back to the page that I'm on. There are 3 sections here. I'm only seeing 2 right now, but there's View Available Opportunities, My Inbox, and there would be My Tasks as well. So in a few minutes when I start an application, that'll become a task, and we'll come back here and we'll see that. Inbox you can ignore. It is a copy of any email you might have received from the system. It doesn't let you do anything. It's just kind of to save your emails, so you can ignore that. But View Available Opportunities, this is where you start your application. So if you want to get an application started, you log in the appropriate role, you click on View Opportunities, and you search for it. Now, this is not the same as the portal. Remember, we looked at the portal before, and we were able to search and find it, but that's only to look at the information. You know, I'm sorry, one thing I forgot to do, I'm going to have to edit this now. When we go and search, I'm going to do that one more time, and I'm going to search for food, for DEC, and one thing I didn't do was click on this button down here, View Grant Opportunity. So I talked about how what all these fields are for. We talked about the Q&A and the amount that's available for funding. But the last thing you want to do, or one of the important things you want to do, is click on this View Grant Opportunity. This is where you actually get the RFA for this grant opportunity. So I click on it, and gives me an error. This is only because I'm in this test system. So if you click on it, let me just copy the shortcut here. Come on, there we go. Okay, if you click on that, you'll be presented with this PDF to open, and you can see it's a 17-page document, and these are the guidelines and application instructions for the grants to reduce wasted food through increased distribution of wholesome food to those in need. You can see it was amended on 9/14, giving the webinar information. And again, it's called DMMEFR in the Grants Gateway. So I would definitely go through this. This is 17 pages explaining what's available, how it works, what kind of projects you can apply with. Here are those key dates that we talked about. And you can see the table of contents here. A couple things. It talks about the budget and what's eligible and ineligible. So I'm going to go down to that. So it talks about what categories you can apply with, or what types of expenses you can put in for. So it shows examples of eligible project items. In my example here, I'm going to put in for a refrigerator, so that's an option. It talks about ineligible project costs, so you can't put in for travel or indirect or administrative. It does talk about match requirements as well. You have to have a 10% match in the grant. So the formula, and this is important to understand because of the way the gateway calculates it, is the requested budget item times 10% is the required match. So whatever the item is, that's the match. And you can see match forms. They could be in forms of cash, personal services, etc. So it's important that you go through here and read this. Some of the questions I've seen come up already in the chat are already answered in this or in that Q&A document. Okay, it goes on to talking about if you do get awarded a contract. And I'm just going to scroll through here a few things. And, yep. I don't think there's anything else that I want to point out, but I do want you to read it and you all to understand it. So again, that is the RFA, or request for applications, and that is found here. If you go into the Grant Opportunity Portal and you search for the word food and you click on this View Grant Opportunity. So let's look at the difference between that and when I'm logged into the Grants Gateway and I click on View Opportunities here. I can still search for food from DEC. And I find the one. Why am I only finding one? Because I'm a not-for-profit, and it's only finding the opportunities that I'm allowed to apply for. So if you click on it, this looks pretty much the same as what we saw before. except for instead of view opportunity, I can apply for the grant opportunity. So this is where you start your application. You log in as the right type of user, you go to view opportunities, you search for it, and you click this button down here on the bottom left. So it's processing it, and you can see I now am in an application. I'm on the application main page. All right, so there's a couple new buttons here. We can see this back button and these green buttons here. So menu, that's the page we're on right now. It's the main page. Forms menu, you notice as I hover, it gives us the menu pop up, but you can actually click on it, and that's what I'll do. So that's where most of the work that you're going to be doing is found. Status changes, eventually we'll submit this, and that's how you do it, through status changes. Management tools, we're going to use both of these as we go through, add, edit people, and check for errors. And then progress reports and related documents, you can ignore that. That's for later on. If you are awarded a contract, there'll be some options you can do in there. I wanted to point out my application number. So it's DEC01 DMMEFR-2018-00033. So I'm the 33rd person to start an application. And if I click on this details, you can see it's a toggle button that opens and closes, but it just reaffirms what document I'm in, the name of my organization, my role, and the current status. So right now the status is in application in process, and as I go through and submit it, that will change. So the main page doesn't show us anything yet because we don't have a project title, we haven't requested any grant funds, and we don't have a total project cost. But that's okay, we'll be able to, we'll see this update as we go through here. And it does confirm that due date of 2/1/2019 at 3 o'clock. All right, so again, I told you everything is in the Forms menu, and that's where we'll go. We'll click on Forms menu. And when you do that, same header information is up there, but now we have this list of forms. So you're going to go through this section by section and fill it out. First few sections are only for your information. So contract document properties is just basically FYI, these are the documents that make up a contract with the state. So there's a link to the master grant contract. This is what grant contracts look like if you were to be awarded one. In there are the terms and conditions, so that might be something you'd want to look at. But besides that is the attachment A1. This is the program or agency-specific terms and conditions. So if you were to click on View File there, you'd be able to see that and see what would become part of a contract if you were awarded one. There's nothing else down below here, so that's it. Just these two documents might be of interest to you. But again, there's nothing you do in them. It's just for your information only. That was contract document properties. Next, application information. Eventually we can print our application. Here's another link to the RFP. And here's application versions. When I submit my application, a PDF will be created and it'll be found right here. So that'll be about 5 or 10 minutes after I submit it. All right, so where you have to start doing your work is right here in project site addresses. So you can see the different sections. Program information, then you're going to be filling out your budget. We have a work plan, and then an upload section. So those are all things you're going to fill out. There's also a grantee document folder. There's no reason to use that unless you're told, so we can not worry about that right now. All right, so back up here we're going to go to project site addresses and fill it out. So I'm just going to write in my organization building. And no, it's not statewide, and my address is just going to be 123 Main Street, Albany. Put in your county, your zip, and you can see there's regional council and agency-specific region. Neither of these are required. Oh, I just saw an error message on the network. I think we're okay now, though. Neither of these are required, so you can just leave them blank if you want. And I'll hit Save. And it'll give me this green light that says the information has been saved. So what I did was I went to the form, I filled out that form and hit Save, and now you can see there's a couple changes. So in this blue bar, remember I told you this was kind of the action bar, now there's an Add button, a Delete button, Add Note, and Check Global Errors. So ignore Add Note, you're not going to be using that. That's not something that's supported in the system here. Global Errors we'll look at later. Delete, if I wanted to delete this whole page, I could do that. If I wanted to add a second address, I could do that by clicking Add, and it'll just give me a blank entry here. and save is what I already did. Now, what if I save something without it being complete? For instance, this first field here has a red asterisk. That's a required field. So if I hit save now, I get an error. Project name description is a required field. So this is one of those types of errors that if you don't take care of all these things, your application won't be submitted. So it does warn you. Now the good thing is it saves it. So you can partially save your application, come back another day, and continue filling it out and not lose what you've done. But you do have to have all these fields with the red asterisks filled out before you submit your application. So I did that, I hit save again, and now you can see I've got the green light again. So let's go back to the Forms menu. I could click on it, or I can just hover on it and click on the next section, which is Program-Specific Questions. So these are the questions that you're being asked to answer for your application. Now, they're pretty short, but they do allow for some uploads. So it starts off with your project title. And I'm just going to say sample sample project name here. So obviously you'll have your real name of your project there. Next is your applicant details. So list your contact info. So it's name, address, phone, email. So obviously you would be filling that information out. That is a red asterisk, again, another field that's required. Are you an eligible entity as defined on page 1 of the RFA applicant eligibility section? So if we went back to that RFA and we went to the applicant eligibility section here, are you this type of organization? So you will have read that and you'll have said, yes, you are. There's an option for an upload here. I'll have DEC chime in and say what that's for. Maybe a way of proving it, I'm not sure. So DEC, please type that if you can think about it. Question 3, describe your organization's operations related to food rescue and or emergency feeding activities. Include any data or details on collaborative partnerships relevant to this project. Okay, so this is basically describing what your organization does. So I'm going to write here is my description, and I'll write it a few times. So obviously you will have written something and pasted it in here. Now, that's a good point. I just said pasting it in here. I would not just sit here and work in the Grants Gateway for this. A couple reasons. First of all, there's a timeout, and that timeout is about 20 minutes. So if you were sitting here and not hitting the save button, after 20 minutes you would lose any work that you put in since your last save. So I can hit save now, that's fine. I will get a couple errors because I didn't do question number 4 yet, but it does save your work even if it's incomplete. Now, the other problem with it is if you're working in Internet Explorer, you can see you only have these 3 or 4 lines to view, and it's hard to see your all the information that you typed in. So if you're going to be typing in a bunch of paragraphs, it's going to be hard to read and spell check and verify it. So what I would do is type your answers in a Microsoft Word document, come back here and copy and paste it. All right, and we didn't answer question number 4 yet. Describe the proposed project to be completed under this RFA. Explain how it will help the organization divert more food to those in need. So again, this is kind of describing what your project does. If it's too long or you've already got it written down in Word, that's fine. You can just attach it here. So maybe I have some information here, but if I want, I can go to Browse and attach a Microsoft Word document. Now I have a PDF here. I'm just going to use that for now, but they do ask for a Word. Now it's not attached yet until I hit the Save button. And then number 5 is not a required question, but it says if this project includes the hiring of staff, describe the duties that will be performed by the staff person. Again, I would copy and paste from Word or some other program like that, and if you have an attachment, you can click on Browse and attach it. So these are not required, but it is something that if your project includes hiring staff, you do need to put in here. All right, so I've answered those 4 questions or 5 questions, and I'll hit Save. And you can see the information has been saved, and I can move on. Now, what I'm actually going to do is not fill out one question. I'm going to forget to fill out question number 1, and I'll hit save. All right, so I've got that error. Let's pretend we don't see it. We'll ignore it for now, and we will get back into it later when we try to submit it, and it tells us we forgot this. So I'm going to go back to the Forms menu, and the next section here, there's that error. We know there's an error there. The next section is budget. So I'm going to take a quick little break, look at some of these questions, and then we'll get back into it. Let's see what's come up here. Again, if you're asking program questions, is my program eligible, is it covered, that kind of thing, this is not the place to ask it. Ask it in the Q&A document, send it in through that. So someone asked, do we need to adhere to a word count limit if we add a section as an attachment? No, you don't. You know, we don't really want you to be crazy excessively long, but enough words to explain what you're doing, that's fine. You don't have to, you're not limited to it. And the limit in the gateway is not words, it's characters. It's characters with spaces. So if you typed in, you know, I space am, that's 4 characters. So it's not 2 words, and it's not, it is 2 words, but it's not 3 characters, it's 4 because there's a space there. Someone asked a question, a couple of these questions, if I didn't answer your question, that's because it's just beyond the scope of this, and you really need to type it to the to that email address. Please realize, though, I will be saving these questions, and I will be going in, and I'll be sending it to DEC, and they'll be able to kind of preemptively or proactively answer them, but still, I suggest you do submit those answers. So anything I didn't answer, the reason is because I can't, and you should send it in to that email address. Okay, so let's say you log out for the day or for lunch, and you come back and you log back in and you want to pick up where you left off. So I did log out, or I didn't log out, but let's say I did, and I'm back in. Now, I talked before about this My Tasks. I can click on Open Tasks and see that application number 33 that I started working on. So you can click on it and get back into it, back to the Forms menu. Another way, though, is applications. Let's say you're not the one that started working on it, so you don't have the task. You can go through here, applications, and search using that same criteria we saw before and find it. So if I search for the word food, I'll find all applications that my organization has started with the word food in it. Or, remember, I knew I was application 33. I could search for 00033 or even just 33, and I can find it. So that was under the Applications button up here to search for it, or if you had started the application yourself, it automatically becomes a task for you, and you can go to Open Tasks and click on it. Either way, I'm back in the application, and I'll go back to the Forms menu and work on the rest of it. So next we have the budget. And I have a little worksheet that I prepared with my budget, but going to the RFA and reading the Q&A, you should be able to figure out what's eligible and what's not. Remember, we can't go over $15,000, but I'm going to put in a couple things here and show you my application, or my budget. So I'm going to start with some personal services salary. So I have a farm to food pantry manager, and I'm going to have that one entered into the grant. So you can see there's a position title and then a role responsibility. What does this person do? So, all right, here's what they do. Okay. Next is number in title. And you're probably all going to be just one person in this title. If you had several people, there'll be an add button later to add a second person. What is their annualized salary? I'm just going to use round numbers, so let's say $40,000. And let's say they work 40 hours a week, and we're going to fund them only 25%. Now, number of months funded. So since this would be 2 years, it's probably 24 months. Because they're not only going to work half of the contract, they're going to work the whole contract. All right, so If that's the case, total grant funds, I'm actually going to change this because the guidance I was given was for 12 months, but I'm going to do something different. So let's say they are $40,000. Let's say they are $50,000. And I'm going to put in for 10%, 10% funded, which means that would be $5,000, except for that's 2 years, so it'll be $10,000. Okay, so we're asking for $10,000 here because we have this person who makes $50,000 a year, and 10% of their time over the next 24 months will be dedicated to this project. Now we need a match, and the match requirements are 10%. So if I put in $1,000 here, that will satisfy that requirement. And we'll get into how those numbers work as we go through this. All right, so far I've asked for $10,000, and I have an $11,000 budget so far. All right, so I have a couple items here I'm going to put in for under equipment. So I'll go back to Forms menu, and I'll go down to equipment. And I'm going to put in for a freezer. So I'll say glass swing door freezer. All right, so I've got a title or equipment type and description, a justification why it's needed, and then are we going to purchase or rent it? And let's say I'm asking for, let's say it's $4,500. Okay, and let's say my match is $450. There's that 10%, and I'll hit save. All right, so if you're doing the math, I asked for $10,000 and then $4,500, so I've asked for $14,500. I'm going to go right up to the max, and I'm going to click on Add now. I can add a second equipment item. And it'll give me a blank entry just like I just had. And I don't know what I'm going to pick, so I'm just going to write another item and another reason that we're going to purchase. Something for $500, and let's say we have a $50 match. So that's 10% of that. Okay, so now that I've added a second item, I've got a drop down here. I can go between those two items. If I want to go back to the freezer, I can do that. I can click on Add and add a third and fourth and so on. If I clicked on Delete, it would delete this whole item. But let's go back to the Forms menu because I want to show you another part of it that you should be doing. And each one you can see has a narrative after it. There's a narrative after personal services, there's a narrative after equipment, and all the other categories as well. So when you go to the narrative for salary, it says provide an explanation of any exceptions in staffing patterns and or annual salary costs. Really just explain what this is needed, how the math works out, and so on. So here is my narrative. And hit save. So this is not a required field, but we would like you to do it. That's something that's important because it helps us understand what your ask in your budget really is about. So I did the narrative for personal services salary. I should also do it for equipment. And because I entered in two items, that doesn't mean there's two narratives. It's just one narrative about that equipment. So there's actually two boxes, though. One is provide documentation regarding bids received or equipment purchases, and the other is a justification for any exceptional equipment purchase rental costs as related to program needs. So you might not need to fill both of these out, but just realize there is a narrative for equipment also. And if I go back to the Forms menu, all these fields look pretty much the same. I could put in for, you can't do travel. That was one of the things that's not in there. So you can see, excuse me, hold on, need some water. You can see the different categories here that you can fill out. And it'll end up with this expenditure summary. Now I'm going to click on it, and I know I'm going to get an error, but that's okay. And I get an error that says match funds total must equal match worksheet detail. Well, that's because I didn't fill out the match detail, the match worksheet yet. But it does show that I have a 10% match, and that's good because 10% match was required. But if I go back and let's say I'm going to put in for salary here, and disregarding the math, let's say I put in for a match of $900 and hit save. And if I go back to the Forms menu and I go back down to the expenditure summary, not only do I have that match worksheet error because I didn't do it yet, but I'm below the threshold of 10%. So I can see that my match is calculated as 9%, but it's supposed to be 10%. So match required is 10%, but the total of these two is only 9%. So it'll never let me submit this application unless I meet that minimum requirement of 10% match. So let's go and fix that. I'll go back to the Forms menu and back to Salary. And I'll put in 4,000 here. And I'm going to do one more thing. And if I go to the Forms menu and back to Equipment, and this other item that was $500, what if I make it $5,000? Or you know what, I'm going to actually change that. What if I make it $501? So two things will happen. One is my match will be off again, I think, because it won't be a full 10%. Let's go back to my expenditure summary. My match is off. It's not 10%. It's rounding down to 9. But also I'm asking for $15,001, and that's not allowable. The system allows it because I can put in for $1 million if I wanted to. But the requirements of the RFA and the requirements of this program say that you can't ask for more than $15,000. So you need to make sure that this number here does not exceed $15,000. The system won't tell you, but you will be disqualified if you're not. So let me go back and fix that. That was under Equipment. And I'll make this back to the $500. And I'll hit Save. Okay, so the last thing in the budget here is I didn't fill out the match worksheet. And if I go down here and click on Match Worksheet, I can fill out and explain where this $1,500 is coming from. So what is the source? Here is one source. Describe it. Here is the description. Form of documentation provided. If you have some kind of documentation to prove it, you can. You can see it's not a required field. And then how much. So let's say this is for that $1,000. You could do it all in one, but in this case, I'm only saying that $1,000. And I've saved that. You can see I've got $1,000 identified. And I'll go and click Add, and add another match source. For $500. So now I am reporting where that $1,500 of match comes from, and you can see that same type of drop-down shows when I have more than one item because I clicked the Add button. So if I go back to the Forms menu and back to my expenditure summary, you can see there's no error there anymore. So I click on that, and there is no error. So everything looks good to me now. I'm asking for $15,000, no more. I've got 10% match, and I show the different categories that comes from. All right, so that's it for the budget. And I'll go back to the Forms menu, and you can see, remember I forgot to answer a question here. That's okay. Next thing is the work plan. Now before we go to that, I'm going to go to this pre-submission upload section. The reason for that is there's 4 attachments here, and you can see that one of them is the work plan worksheet. So we give you a template that you can fill out to help you organize your thoughts on your work plan. So there is a project timeline, and as part of the RFP, we ask you to upload a timeline. So it can be however you want it, but we do need to have something that makes sense and is legible. We would suggest you put it in a Word document or maybe even a PowerPoint or something, and then save it as a PDF, and what you're attaching is a PDF. So it says, please upload only MS Word documents or unencrypted, unsecured PDFs. Now, what does that mean? If I go into something, so sometimes you get PDFs that are password protected. And if I went into one of these, let's say this budget example, it's got the word secured up on top there. And that is something that will cause the application submission to have an issue. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be disqualified. It just means it makes it harder for us to review it, and may take longer for us to review it. Because what it does is, I mentioned before, if I go back into the Forms menu, I mentioned before that your application will generate a PDF here in this application versions. This would be your entire application. Well, when you have a secured document that you upload, it will make that process fail in our system, and we won't be able to give you a one document for your application. So to avoid that, don't upload secured documents. Don't upload something with a password in it. Our system can't read it. All right? But back to the pre-submission uploads, I would create a document, I'd save it as a Word or a PDF, and I click on Browse, and I just attach it here. Now, I'm just going to attach this sample document. Now, if there's something else, if you have another document related to your timeline, we just left you another space here to upload it. You can see not required. Same thing here with this placeholder. In case we realize down the road there's something else you need to provide, or you really think you need to provide another document, you can put that here. And the other thing is the work plan worksheet. So this is a template to help you map out the worksheet, map out the work plan. So first I'm going to hit Save because I didn't save my timeline yet. And now I have. And I can prove that by clicking on View File and clicking on Open and seeing what I've attached. Now you can see mine is just this one document that says Sample Attachment. It's not a secured PDF, but this would be the document you uploaded. So I strongly suggest that whenever you upload something, that you click on View File to make sure that it's not secured, it's not password protected, but also that it came in right. You know, make sure you attach the right document. But we do provide you this work plan worksheet, and you would click on this and open up the document. I can't because I have to, because I'm in the test system, I have to do something quick here, but you would just click on it. All right, so you click on the work plan worksheet, and it's a Word document. And it, again, allows you to organize your thoughts, organize your work plan so that you can put it into the gateway. So your project name, your contractor name, your work plan period, and then the project summary, a high-level overview of the project, including the overall goals and desired outcomes, include information such as location, target population, number of persons to be served, service delivery method, and hours of operation. So this is text here, allowing you to type whatever you want to go through what is your project plan. All right, then there's this organizational capacity. And this is explaining what your organization can do, how you have experience. Again, you can type in there and fill it out. I would probably not make it red. And not make it italic, but you get the point. So that's two sections that if we go back into the gateway, and we go back to the work plan, that's here on this work plan overview form. So what are the dates? And I forget the dates. Let me see if it says it here. (5/1). So 5/1 to 4/30. So 5/1/2019 to 4/30/2021. So then that project summary, you could take it from whatever you typed in here and copy and paste it in here. Okay, you can see it allows up to 50,000 characters. That's about 12 pages in Microsoft Word, so there's plenty of room to explain your project. Organizational capacity, same deal. I could copy and paste it from my Word document here. That only allows up to 4,000 characters. Basically you're describing how well equipped is your organization to actually do this. Okay, so I'll hit save and complete that. Now the other part of the work plan is the objectives, tasks, performance measures. And I have one that's already filled out. Let me open up this work plan example. So here would be a project summary I could have pasted, but I'm not doing that. Here is the organizational capacity. And then here is the work plan worksheet for the objectives, tasks, and performance measures. Okay, so there are objective names and descriptions. There are task names and descriptions and performance measure names and descriptions. Okay, so what it is the objective is the high-level goal. What is the main thing you're going to be accomplishing with this objective? Tasks are, the smaller tasks related to that. Think of them as the milestones. And performance measures are how do we know that you actually attained that goal? How did you achieve it? How do we measure it? So, for instance, this case, it's working relationships with 5 farmers in Western New York. So that's a quantifiable goal. We can see at the end, did we have partnerships with 5 farmers in Western New York? Now, at the end, you're not in trouble if it turns out that you only had 4, but this is just showing what your goals are for your project. Another one here, increase food donations by 10,000 pounds. So again, it's nice to have quantifiable numbers or dates or something like that. Not necessarily. You can see receive donations from all major donators from the previous year. So that's a good one. Having return donors, maybe you can find somebody who you can record, who did it last year and if they came back this year for the same. So again, you're going to use this worksheet just to fill it out and kind of organize your thoughts. You don't have to, but in the end, it has to go into the Grants Gateway in that same format. So if I go to the Forms menu and I go to Work Plan Properties, we have this work plan page. Now, if you are new to the Gateway, this won't matter to you, but if you've used the Gateway before, this might look different to you because the work plan was updated on July 20th of this year. So starting July 20th, grant opportunities have a different work plan. It's easier to use, easier to understand, easier to navigate. So here's how it works. You can see your only option here is an objective name and description. So I'll go back to my work plan worksheet, and my name is Increased Food Recovery from WNY Farmers. Now, there is no description written here, but that's okay. It's not a required field. But if you did want to, you've got up to 250 characters. So I'll just write, here is the description. All right, and I'll hit save. So now that I've saved one objective, I need to put in a task. So I can put in task 1.1. But it also gives me a second blank objective because maybe I have another objective. Right now, we'll just focus on objective number 1 and now the first task. So I go in and take my first task. It was increase farmer relations. Okay? And then the description is expand the number of farmers donating excess fresh food. All right? That's easy enough. And now I'll hit save. So now that I've hit save, I've got objective 1, task 1.1, and now I have a blank performance measure. So I can put in my performance measure, partnership outreach. Oops, right here. And I want to get rid of that Roman numeral there. And what is the performance measure data capture type? Is it text? Is it only a number? Is it a yes, no? Is it a date? Is it a combination of some of those items? I'm just going to do text 500. That's probably what you'll choose for most of them. But I can go here and copy and paste this. Now, it probably would have fit under 250. But you can see I put that in and it's 119 characters. And I can hit save. So every time I save a task, I get a new blank task. I saved task 1.1. And now I have a blank 1.2 if I want to. Every time I save a performance measure, 1.1.1, I get a blank performance measure if I want to add a second. Doesn't mean I have to, but you can. And the same thing with objectives. Since I saved objective number 1, I now have a blank number 2 if I want to use it. So I'll just go and do a few more here. We're going to do increased donation here. So that's going to be 1.1.2. and I'll make it text 250, and I'll take this. You can see with your copying and pasting, just make sure it looks clean. And I didn't take it all. Let's see. So let me finish that sentence, and I'll hit save. So now I've got Objective 1 has one task with 2 performance measures. Well, I also had a third performance measure. I could do that. Oh, I wonder if that, yeah, so I didn't describe performance measure 2. I can see I did that wrong the way I copied and pasted it, but you get the point here. There's 3 there. But let's go and do the second task. So I'm going to enhance current farmer relations. So that would be task 1.2. And here's the description. And if I hit save, you should expect a performance measure 1.2.1. I'll hit save, and there's a 1.2.1. There's also a 1.3, but I'm going to do this performance measure first. And I'm going to do this. And I'll do a text 250 and my description. And I'll hit save. Okay, so I've got one objective, one task, 2 tasks. The first task has 1 performance measure, 2 performance measures, and a blank third. And the first one only has 1 performance measure. So I can add any number of those. Let's say my performance measures I actually messed up. I realize for whatever reason I want this one to be first. I want 1.1.2, increased donation. I want this to be up here. Well, I can click the up arrow. And now increased donation is 1.1.1. So I can reorder these if I want to. I can also shrink them down. Let's say I'm done with Objective 1, and I don't want to look at all of it. I can shrink the objective, the task, the performance measures. I can shrink everything if I want. You can see it does a kind of color coding. Darker blue is objective, a little lighter is task, and then the lighter is performance measures. And let's say, let me look at my work plan here. I don't have a second objective, but I'm going to make one. So let's say I have a second objective. I'll go here to Objective 2, and I'll write another objective. And once I hit save, I'll get those options for a new task. And if I hit save, I have to have at least 1 performance measure. And I'll just put in my text. And I'll hit save. So now I have 2 objectives with multiple tasks, multiple performance measures. All right. If you keep going, you can see it's going to get kind of long, but you can certainly collapse any area that you want by clicking the minus button. You can collapse them all, and then expand only the one that you're working on. For instance, task number 2.2. I can go there and fill that out. So it's pretty easy to navigate. If you had a document to guide you like this, that helps. Not necessary, but it does help you organize the way things look and kind of organize your thoughts. All right, so we're almost done here, and we'll get to some of those questions. We'll go back to our application by clicking on it here, or I can click on Forms menu if I want. And in the Forms menu, we've done the program information, the budget. Remember, we forgot to answer a question there. Our work plan, and we did the pre-submission uploads, and the last thing is a grantee document folder. Again, that's not required. We prefer you don't use it unless you're actually asked to, but if you needed to upload something, you can give it a name, click on Browse, and you'd be able to hit the Save button to attach something. I think we give you enough places to upload things that we're asking for. We don't want people to just randomly update things because they'd be nice to have. We don't want these applications to be overwhelmingly long. But again, that is a spot that you can make uploads if you need to. All right, so ignoring this one error, I feel like I'm done and I want to have it submitted. Now remember, I can't submit it. I'm a grantee, I'm in the role of grantee, so I don't have the ability to submit this application. But somebody else at my organization does, and her name is Barbara Signatory. So she could just log in and go to applications and search for it. Or I can go to management tools, add edit people, and add her. Now this is not necessary, but if I check her name, what this does is it just makes it a little easier for her because it allows her to get it as a task now, where before it was not. So she's a grantee contract signatory, and if I log out and I log in as her, looks the same except she's a contract signatory and she does have a task. So she could go up to applications and search for it. But in this case, since I gave it to her as a task, I can click on it, click on the application number, and I can work on all the things that the previous person did as well. Now, one thing you could do is management tools, check for errors, and it would run through and give you all the errors. Well, remember, I forgot to answer question number 1. I'm going to ignore that right now. Let's try to submit it without answering that question. As you can imagine, it's not going to let us. So, the way of submitting an application is going to status changes, as long as you're the right type of user, and clicking on the button application submitted. She does so, and she gets that same error check and that same error. So I better go take care of question number 1. And we can see that was the applicant details information, so your name, email, phone, address, etc. All right, so you would have filled that out and hit save. And now there are no more errors. So she can now submit it. Let's remind us that we're in the status of application in process. So that's going to change when I go to status changes, application submitted. So it makes you read and agree to this agreement, basically saying I am who I say I am. I'm allowed to submit an application on behalf of my organization. I will click on I agree, and it's going to submit her application. If I clicked on I do not agree, it just would bring us back to the forms menu. It doesn't delete it or anything like that. All right, so now she submitted it. How do I know I submitted it? Hold on, I need a sip of water. So how do I know that I submitted it? Well, a couple of ways. Number 1, in details, it's now in a different status called assignment of reviewers, so it's been sent in to the DEC. Number 2, she would have just received an email that says, congratulations, you submitted application number 33. And number 3, a little more subtle, is I don't have it as a task anymore. If I went back home, there's no more tasks because that one is no longer in our a task for us. It's now a task for the DEC. I could still go to applications and search for it, but I can't work on it anymore because I've submitted it. Okay, so I can go through the forms menu, I can look at it, all those pages that I worked on before. I can go back to program-specific questions. I can type whatever I want here. Doesn't matter, though, because there's no save button. It's already been submitted to us. It's too late to make any changes. Now, you may decide that you really do want to make changes, and it's before February 1st, and that's fine with us. You can call, or actually you're going to have to email the help desk and say, hey, my application number 33, I submitted it, but I'd like it back so I can make some edits. That's fine. You can do that as long as you resubmit it before that due date of February 1st. Okay, so I know a bunch of questions came in. I'm going to answer those the best I can. And then there's one other thing we want to look at, which is a few minutes after you've submitted your application, if you go to the forms menu, the application versions will appear. And actually it's there now, so why don't we look at it while we're right here. So this PDF is created with everything that we just did. If I click on it, you can see there's the PDF, and I can click on that and open it up. All right, so this is everything that I just put into my application. Cover page, the name of my organization, the application number, the name of my project, and when I submitted it. And what I asked for, $15,000. Okay, next is submission information. This is just who submitted it and when, what she agreed to. And then it starts with, in order of the forms menu, the project site addresses. So there's that 123 Main Street that I put in. Next is the program-specific questions. So I put in my project name, which was not very interesting. And then I put in my address information. Obviously, this would be your name, address, phone number, email. Are you an eligible entity as defined on page 1? Yes, I am. I looked at it and I am. What about your description? Here's a description of my project. Number 4, this was a description of my organization's operations. This is a description of the project, and I also uploaded a document. Now, where is that document? Well, we'll find it as we get to the end of these questions. So it's not going to be inserted right after the question. It'll be inserted after all the questions. So I have one more question, which was number 5, and then there's my answer that was written. Now comes any attachments I provided. So there's that sample attachment that I showed you before. Next comes the budget. So if let me zoom out here. Here's my budget summary. There's that $15,000, which was $10,000 in salary, $5,000 in equipment, and I had a match of $1,000 and $500, and that's all broken down on the next pages. So here's that farm to food pantry manager for $10,000. There's that salary justification, and here's the salary narrative. Then we get into the equipment. I had 2 items. One for $4,500, one for $500. Here's the narrative about those 2 items. And I had nothing else here. So there's a justification for that as well. So if you had other categories, they would show in here. I didn't. Next is the match worksheet, showing the breakdown of those 2 match items I had, $1,000 and $500. Next is my work plan. So this is my project summary, again up to 50,000 characters. Next is my work plan details. There's the objectives, tasks, performance measures. Objective 2, task, performance measure. And then finally is the organizational capacity. And lastly is all of the other attachments. Remember, I had one attachment, which was my work, what was it, the project plan? Now I forget the name of it. If we go back to the forms menu, I just want to verify. The timeline, that's what it was. So I go to my pre-submission uploads. Remember, I uploaded something here in the project timeline. That would be the last few pages, however many pages it is. That's the last thing that shows here. Okay, so that's what this document looks like. You can see it makes it a lot easier for the DEC to review your application when it's in this format instead of them having to click through all the different pages here. So it is good that it creates that, and just make sure that yours is successful by putting in a PDF that is not password protected.